Joe is a self-diagnosed nymphomaniac who is telling a man named Seligman about her sexual encounters. After discovering her beaten in an alley, Seligman took her to his home and took care of her. Joe reveals that she was on a field trip in the hills when she was 12 years old. In a flashback, we see young Joe resting alone in the fields, surrounded by nature. She then experiences a vision of two women looking over her as she floats up and has her first orgasm unexpectedly. Joe believes that the women she saw were variations of the Virgin Mary, but Seligman tells her that they were the prostitutes of Babylon and Valeria Messalina, wife of Roman Emperor Claudius, who was also known as a wild nympho. Joe then recalls how many years ago she lost her sexual sensation while being with her boyfriend Jerome. In a flashback, she plays with her kitty cat and tries everything she can, but she still can't feel anything. Seligman compares this to Zeno's paradox and proceeds to give a calculative answer as to why she couldn't achieve satisfaction. Joe becomes irritated by this mathematical analysis and accuses him of ignoring the seriousness of her lost sexuality. And finally, Seligman admits that he is asexual and a virgin, therefore unable to relate to her stories. He further emphasizes that he's the best person to listen and judge her story because he has no preconceived notions. Years ago, Joe's body is unresponsive to intercourse, but she's still able to have fun with Jerome. During this time, when she's unable to feel physical desire, she's also enjoying domestic comfort for the first time since Jerome moved in with her. She eventually becomes pregnant after being negligent with birth control pills, and a few months after that, she gives birth to a baby boy, whom she names Marcel. Even though Joe no longer feels sexual pleasure, her nymphomania remains, and she continues to demand that Jerome have a lot of intercourse every day, which finally gets exhausting for him. One day, Jerome tells Joe that he admires her adventurous attitude, but is unable to please her in the way she desires. He wants to maintain their life in bed, but Jerome also suggests that she take on new boyfriends to help satisfy her hunger. The next day, Joe disguises herself as a piano teacher and carries Beethoven sheet music. She then stops her car in the middle of a one-way street and removes all of the spark plugs. Shortly after that, a male driver stops behind her and she asks for help. All the men who have been delayed by her stalled car are now trying to figure out how to properly repair the spark plugs. This allows her to seduce men while a large crowd gathers around her, and when Joe returns home, she finds Jerome and her son waiting for her. There's an uneasiness between them, and he punches into the wall in an attempt to hide his jealousy. 3 years later, Joe is seen with Marcel walking in the park. She reveals that Jerome spends most of his time away from home, and when he does return, he accuses her of neglecting their baby, which she believes is merely a cover for his jealousy over her lovers. But even though she sleeps with a lot of males, Joe still doesn't feel satisfied. One day, Joe notices 5 black dudes speaking a different language in the park. She watches them from her window and thinks that having a sexual encounter where verbal contact is impossible might excite her. Joe then hires a translator to ask the man if he wants to bang her. The translator then approaches the guy and returns with a note giving a time and location. The location turns out to be a very cheap motel. Then, as planned, the man she likes walks into the room, accompanied by a smaller man. Joe is then undressed by both men, and they begin arguing about who will penetrate her from behind and who will have it vaginally. She eventually climbs on top of the person she likes, which irritates the other guy, and as a result, the two men begin to fight, which makes her irritated, so Joe leaves the room. Next, Joe enters a waiting room in what appears to be an empty building. 2 women sit calmly at her side. The door opens and a man, whom she refers to as K, exits a corridor and observes others who are waiting. He asks Joe who she is, and she tells him that she knows what he does and wishes to be one of the ladies he sees. K refuses her, and instead, he invites another woman in, calling her Madame. After Madame departs, K informs Joe that he doesn't believe this is for her. He then leads the last woman inside the corridor, leaving Joe alone in the waiting area. Sometime later, K returns to the hallway where Joe is still waiting. He then orders her to sit still as he punches her in the face. K then smacks her hard and violently. He smacks her again, and Joe takes a moment to recover. Eventually, K agrees to let her join, but states that he won't sleep with her under any circumstances. They don't have a safe word, therefore no matter what she says, he won't stop. He then outlines the third rule. If she wants to join, she must wait between 2 and 6 a.m. Joe tells him that her babysitter is unreliable and that she can't leave her child, but Kate begins to walk away. Days later, Joe leaves Marcel with a babysitter. She's eventually taken into the back room with Kay. Because the chair is too small for her, Kay has Joe lean over an old couch instead. She goes over to one side on her stomach, and he tightens a seatbelt across her back, strapping her in. Nevertheless, a few moments later, he does nothing and tells her to return on Thursday. On Thursday, Joe calls the babysitter's answering machine and berates her for not turning up. And after some thinking, Joe leaves her sleeping toddler at home alone so she can attend her meeting with Kay. This time, the man binds her again and tightens the seatbelt across her back. He warns Joe that he's going to hit her, and no matter how loud she yells, no one can hear her down there. He then smacks Joe 12 times while she whimpers in pain and ends the session. And before leaving, Joe thanks him, and Kay tells her she's very welcome. At this point, Joe becomes so addicted to the interaction with Kay that she abandons her young son in his crib at home, unattended. One evening, while she's with Kay, the 3-year-old Marcel hears a snowplow outside and wakes up. He then crawls out of his crib and rushes to the balcony. Jerome returns home later to find his son unsupervised on the outside balcony. In the next scene, Joe and Jerome are seated by the fireplace. He wonders if she loves him and asks if she plans to leave tonight. Joe tells him that she won't go anywhere, but he accuses her of lying to him. Jerome promises that if she leaves tonight, she will never see Marcel or himself again. That night, Joe is conflicted about leaving to go meet with Kay. When Jerome notices this, he wonders if she's saying goodbye and points out that she's not a mother. He startles Marcel, who starts crying and reaching out to Joe. Jerome, hoping to change her mind, points out that it's Christmas, but Joe still leaves the house. And after she returns from her appointment with Kay, she discovers that Jerome and Marcel have gone. In the present, Joe informs Seligman that Jerome too could not prioritize a child in his life, so he placed Marcel in a foster family somewhere in rural England. Her only touch with her son is the £1,000 she anonymously deposits into his account each month. Joe continues her story, revealing how she had to attend an intercourse addict therapy session. Her activities are well known in her new workplace, forcing her boss to order her to attend therapy or risk losing her job. When questioned why she hates therapy, Joe explains that she became pregnant after she left Jerome and Marcel. She demands that her doctor terminate the 11-week pregnancy, but he insists that she first consult with a therapist. Joe's attitude toward the situation causes the visit to the therapist to fail miserably. Having no other option, she decides to take matters into her own hands and perform the abortion herself. Joe aborts the fetus using multiple household items and a wire hanger, recalling that she learned in medical school. Joe then unwillingly attends the meetings, and after eliminating practically everything from her apartment, she tries to fix herself. 3 weeks later, she notices a reflection of her younger self in the mirror during one of her meetings. She then insults everyone in the group, including the therapist. Joe says that she isn't like them because she's a nymphomaniac who loves herself for it. She loves her body and her disgusting lust, realizing that she has no place in normal society. Joe meets a man named L, who introduces her to organized crime. She then works as a debt collector, relying on her deep knowledge of men, sex, and sadomasochism. She recalls a memorable house call she made to a man she initially found sexually unreadable. The henchman trashed several of his belongings, but the man appears unconcerned. Joe takes down his pants and tries several scenarios to see what will stimulate him, such as sadomasochism, homosexuality, and so on. However, he doesn't respond to anything. As a final resort, she tells him a story of a boy playing in the playground who looks at him, sits on his lap, and asks if he may come home with him. Due to this, the man's erection grows stronger, and he eventually agrees to pay her to get her to stop. Joe then feels sorry for him and performs fellatio on him. In the present, Seligman is confused as to why she would feel sorry for a pedophile. Joe tells Seligman about her strong compassion for people born with prohibited sexuality. She empathizes with the man's loneliness and status as a sexual outcast, and she admires him for going through life without acting on his irrational desires. After a few years, Joe's debt collecting business expands, allowing her to make larger anonymous deposits to Marcel. One day, Elle recommends to Joe that she groom her successor and suggests P, who is the 15-year-old daughter of criminals. Joe is initially repulsed by the suggestion, but eventually comes to sympathize with the girl in question. P is a young girl who is weak, lonely, and emotionally wounded, and she instantly hooks onto Joe. They have a special relationship because they connect. Joe warms her heart to P and finally asks her to move into her home after she reaches the age of 18. Joe and P's connection develops a sexual dimension over time, eventually to romance. As P appears to mature, Jo reluctantly starts to teach her young lover the complexities of her business. P is now working with Jo and the two henchmen, but she violently approaches the victim, threatening him with a gun and causing Jo to yell at her. In an odd coincidence, Jo and P walk to the debtor's house and notice the name Jerome Morris on the door. Jo is shocked and proposes that P do this one alone. She tells P that she should just show up and offer him a reasonable payment plan with no one harmed or hurt. The girl then rings the doorbell and walks in with the two henchmen. Now, Jo reveals that Jerome was supposed to repay his loan in 6 installments. She becomes uncomfortable and restless whenever P goes to his house to collect. Several moments later, on the evening of the final payment, P does not kiss Jo goodbye. She becomes skeptical as the hours pass by. Jo lies in bed expecting P to appear whenever she notices a car light in her window. And finally, Jo arrives at Jerome's house and notices the two henchmen sleeping in a car parked out front. From the window, she notices a naked P in the kitchen and Jerome sneaking up from behind to hug her. The next evening, Jo takes the gun she seized from P out of the closet. She returns down the alleyway and stops when she notices Jerome and P kissing. Jerome then walks straight by Jo, who points her gun and pulls the trigger, but nothing happens. She tries again, but it just clicks. After a while, Jerome punches Jo in the face and begins brutally assaulting her, while P stands by silently. Following that, P and Jerome become intimate in front of Jo, and the girl urinates on her before departing. Moments later, Seligman discovers her in this situation and takes her home with him. In the present, Jo informs Seligman that she still has no idea why the gun didn't work. She had checked to see whether there were any rounds in the gun and had removed the safety. Seligman reminds her that no one can shoot a Walter PPK unless they rack it by pulling and releasing the sliding mechanism. Jo agrees he's correct and that she's seen it 1,000 times in the movies. Moments later, Seligman notices that it's dawn and that the sun is rising, so he suggests Jo get some rest before she falls asleep. Jo expresses gratitude to Seligman for putting her at ease by listening to her story. She also thanks him for being her newest and possibly first friend in her entire life. Also, Jo says she's happy the shot didn't go off and make her a murderer. When Seligman asks Jo if she plans to contact Marcel, she admits it's a possibility. They then bid each other good night before she closes the door. Moments later, Seligman returns to the darkroom with his pants off. He then attempts to assault her, but she refuses him. He tries to convince her that it doesn't matter since she slept with thousands of guys, but Jo shoots him. She then changes her clothes and hurries out of the apartment. If you like this video, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can watch more videos like this. Thanks for watching.